Making sure the slide comes up. Good morning. Hey, welcome to day 2. It's great to see another good turnout, and I know it's early in the morning, so appreciate that. So as Dave said, it's day 2. It's also year 2 of Apiculture New Zealand's existence, and I'm into my second year as Chief Executive. I have to say it's been a blur as I've come to grips with this fascinating, dynamic, if not at times challenging industry. It's also been 2 years of building on the strong foundations and the strong associations of the past, coming together under one umbrella organisation, and for that I really would like to thank our loyal members, many of whom I've seen at conference already. It's been your ongoing commitment to a pan-industry approach, founded on the principles of industry good, that have really directed our work over the past 2 years. Last year at Rotorua, I talked about our emerging industry vision, mission and strategy to support our direction. We completed that work last year with feedback from members, and I'd just like to touch on the vision. Apiculture New Zealand's mission is to be a trusted and united body, creating value and opportunity for our members. The board and I are very clear on the understanding that trust and confidence are vital to the success of this organisation. We know it takes time to build that trust, and we don't take anything for granted. In talking to members around the country and those looking to join APNZ, the question is rightly asked: what value can you deliver for me, for my business, for my hobby? My response is twofold. As an organisation, we work hard to support members, whether it's working on trade and market access issues directly with MPI, or through our standards focus group, whether it's keeping up to date with the latest industry, keeping you up to date with the industry issues through our weekly update and our journal. Then there's the professional submissions that we present on behalf of industry to make sure our voice is heard, as well as the often behind-the-scenes advocacy, means visits to the Minister's office and with officials at the Ministry. Again, there's the work of our focus groups, which sees a considerable number of industry experts, whether it's scientists or beekeepers, voluntarily working hard on industry issues, things like alternative organic varroa treatments, to supporting key industry science programs like combating the giant willow aphid, to leading our GIA, our Government Industry Agreement bid. I really just want to acknowledge the role and work our focus group members play in supporting you, the members. Their knowledge and expertise is hugely important to supporting our organisation and providing credible and practical advice and input into policy matters. So for a small voluntary organisation, I think we do deliver value, and we are committed to a level of professionalism that is a must if we want to have our voice heard in the corridors of power. So that's the first part of my response. The second part I direct squarely back at those asking the question of value. No one gets off lightly. In turn, how can you support this industry, one that in many instances has been good to you? Our industry's grown hugely over the last 10 to 15 years. In 2006, our exports sat at 36 million. Today, they're over 330 million, with ambitions to grow to $1 billion plus industry by 2028. Today, we are a significant player in New Zealand's primary sector, and our honey and bee products command a premium on the international stage. We've got there largely off the back of Manuka honey, along with hard work, entrepreneurial effort, and the work of pioneers like Dr. Peter Molan. We don't want to lose those gains. To make sure we capitalise on that growth, maintain that value and premium requires 2 things: an understanding of the immense value the industry can gain from having a united approach to industry development issues and challenges, and frankly the need to step up and seriously invest in our industry to make the most of its potential. This includes protecting our IP in the industry, from protecting the word manuka and other descriptors for our native monofloral honey as part of our New Zealand story and value proposition to the world. The need to step up is where a commodity levy comes in, and you would have heard that word mentioned a few times yesterday. Many of you will be familiar with the commodity levy, as our own industry operated under a levy for many years, and many of our primary sector colleagues already have this in place. Organisations like horticulture, wine, kiwi fruit, beef and lamb and the dairy industry already have it in place. For those of you not so familiar how it works, it's that members do pay a compulsory levy targeting the commodity, for example, fruit, milk or wine. Those levies are focused on commercial activities and are usually gathered at the relevant collection agency, for example, when cattle go to a freezing works or when vegetables are packed. So why introduce a commodity levy for our industry, particularly when we've been through and going through some challenging seasons, not just on the weather front, but in the growing competition for resources and the softening of prices for honey at the extraction point. I would argue this is exactly why we need to change. We need to look at how we build our industry and make sure we have the investment we need to secure a strong and stable funding base, one that will allow us to build on our capability around research, technical expertise and policy, one that's going to future-proof our industry so that we're actually less susceptible to the boom-bust cycle. A commodity levy that will allow us to address some biosecurity challenges, things like new pests and diseases that we don't want in our country, small hive beetle, European foul brood, the Africanised bee. APNZ does what it can on a voluntary basis with limited funds, but we need to do so much more. And with the current voluntary funding model, it hamstrings our ability, for example, to get some national work programs and multi-season projects underway. One of the most common concerns that has come up this year, for example, centres on how we continue to manage Varroa, and that was a discussion point in some of the sessions yesterday, and what future treatments we might need to put in place. For us to fully understand the potential issues and find some long-term solutions requires some serious industry research. Investment. Government's not going to do it for us, but they may come to the party and share the cost if we can present a united, well-thought-out proposal that demonstrates our long-term financial commitment. The power of the commodity levy also gives us that ability to leverage those valuable third-party funding options, for example, through the Government Sustainable Farming Fund. Our aim is to implement a commodity levy that's fair and practical. It is focused on the commodity, which is honey, not the hive, which has been how industry was levied in the past. And we will be going out to industry widely on this. We've got rota shows around the country. We've got a workshop session on it tomorrow. And we've also got a pamphlet which is available here at conference out in the foyer. Today, I'll just take you through a high-level view of what we're proposing and why we've structured it the way we have. You'll have plenty of time to ask questions over the next day, and again, we've got the roadshow. Our proposal is a commodity levy based on honey extracted for commercial purposes, with funds to be invested in industry good activities. We're proposing a levy of 10 cents per kilogram of honey. We believe it will raise about $2 million based on approximately 20 million kilograms of honey produced in New Zealand every year. So what does a commodity levy enable us to do? We've come up with areas of investment based on previous industry research, feedback, for example, the Colony Loss Survey, just as a starting point. From that, we know that bee health and biosecurity consistently rate as the top concerns of our industry. So the funds are heavily geared to those areas, and you'll see 40% of the funds on science, 20% on biosecurity. So while we've outlined the buckets of investment, this is your opportunity too to have feedback into where you'd like to see that investment go. If you don't think we've got it right, please tell us. So I'm not going to go through each in detail because there'll be plenty of time for that, but I just wanted to touch on a couple of things. Bee health, for example. As I said, what do we need to know to make sure we stay on top of Varroa? What about the impact of pesticides on bee health? We actually have very little, if any, research on those kind of things. Or the impact of pesticides or understanding pesticides residues in our honey. This issue is increasingly front of mind with our international markets. We need to be on top of these sorts of things. On the biosecurity front, Look, it's government's responsibility to manage pre-border and border, but how can we work with them to make sure they're thinking about and actively considering our priorities? For example, identifying new bee diseases at point of entry, introducing new sentinel hives and programs of work. Then there's the education and skills, market access. Look, we've got to get on top of market access. We've got to be constantly ahead of the game. Issues like C4 sugars need to be understood and need to be dealt with to make sure our honey passes international scrutiny. So all of that requires investment and commitment. As outlined earlier, the proposed commodity is based on honey extracted for commercial purposes. So it is targeting those who produce honey commercially, whether through an extraction plant or outside of the RMP system. So why just commercial operators? Why not the whole of industry? Why honey, not hives, as was done in the past? Look, we were guided by the Commodity Levy Act, and we could have gone for hive numbers, but that's not strictly the commodity, and frankly, it's not that reliable in terms of getting accurate numbers. We know this is a challenge today, where hive numbers aren't always accurately reported or recorded. So honey going through an extraction plant, just like cattle at the freezing works or milk through the processing plant, is officially recorded, or at least the majority is. While most of that might be through an RMP, there are also those honey producers that produce for farmers' markets, do their own extraction. We will have a facility for them to self-declare their honey volumes through a web portal. We haven't included non-commercial members or packers and processors in it. We did look at this, but again, we were guided by the Commodity Levy Act. Packers and processors, unless they have an integrated model where they produce honey and have hives, don't produce the commodity. It's no different to how other sectors run their levies. With non-commercial producers, yes, they produce honey, but we looked at other primary sector models. There's a very clear commercial focus on levy collection. For example, your backyard orchard isn't going to be levied unless, of course, they sell at the farmer's market. We also needed to be practical and weigh up the benefit of having all beekeepers within the levy system versus the practical reality of collecting a levy from over 6,000 beekeepers based on very small volumes. It just wasn't practical, and administratively, it would be a very costly exercise. So we make no apologies that ours is a pragmatic approach, one that does ensure we collect levies on 80% of the honey produced in the country for 20% of the effort. That doesn't mean that packers and non-commercial members cannot be involved in industry good activities. Be assured, you will still be a very important part of industry, and we will continue to encourage you to join APNZ as members. You'll also continue to have board representation and access to all the services we provide. There will be plenty of time to go through the detail, because as part of the consultation process, you'll see the timetable up there. And you'll see that if we do get the levy, this is the process that we need to follow. I appreciate it's a lot to take in, but I urge you to keep going back to the reasons why we need to get this. A commodity levy paves the way for a considered approach to how we protect, grow and create value for our industry. Please consider the proposal carefully, join the discussions, ask the questions and make your vote count in October. Before I finish and hand over to the Minister, I would like to briefly update you on the other activities we've been undertaking on our members' behalf. The first is progress with the Government Industry Agreement, the GIA. Following the vote for the GIA, we've handed in our application to the Ministry and look forward to hearing the outcome of that in the near future. Just a reminder, the GIA is about giving our industry a decision-making voice at the table whenever any biosecurity incursion occurs that directly affects our country. So we prepare our plans and our position for how we want to manage incursions. We've got to do this. It's an important step in managing biosecurity readiness and response, but it doesn't take away the need for government and making sure we're working with them, or they're doing what they need to do to manage pre-border and border security, biosecurity. And finally, I do want to acknowledge the tremendous amount of work that our Education and Skills Focus Group has done to get the New Zealand apprenticeship in apiculture in place. At the conference last year, I spoke about our aspirations of getting an apprenticeship program, getting some training in for New Zealanders in place. And to stand here today and have a program in place, ready to go, is just such a huge achievement. For that, I'd like to thank the members of the focus group who have volunteered their time and expertise to develop the scheme, and ably led by Stuart Fraser, whose energy and optimism has been the driving force behind getting the apprenticeship in place. Make sure you talk to Stuart and the team, and if you can, go to their workshop tomorrow. Having young New Zealanders come into this industry and to be able to provide them with a professional pathway to learn and grow is of huge benefit to our industry. It provides consistency, high quality training, and importantly has been developed by industry for industry. To further encourage people to enter the workforce, I'm really pleased to announce a new scholarship today to encourage young New Zealanders who want to take up a career in the industry and undertake training that best supports best practice beekeeping. This scholarship has been kindly sponsored by the Mossop family and is called the Ron Mossop Youth Scholarship in Beekeeping. Ron was a leading pioneer in this industry. He built a values-based business, family business, focused on integrity and quality. Today, the Mossop family honours those values through the Scholarship Fund, which will be awarded annually. You'll hear more about that in the upcoming industry communications. Our industry, it is a really interesting time in its journey. We've made some huge and good progress in coming together, largely under one banner, and around that we've started to build some good infrastructure and relationships with key stakeholders. But it only allows us to go so far. If we want to realise our industry vision of being a growing contributor to New Zealand's economy, nationally respected, internationally recognised, if we want to build a long-term sustainable industry that commands premiums and looks after the health of our bee population, we need to step up. We need serious investment in research, the ability to drive innovative thinking, and build a more secure partnership with government. A commodity levy, alongside the willingness of industry to support its national body, will give us that ability. I urge you all to keep an open mind as we have the discussions with you all around the country. This is a great industry, and it's a good time to think about where you want our industry to be, not next year, but in the next 10, 20 years and longer. Thank you.